Welcome to the Fantasy Formula 1 podcast. I'm your host, Paul. Today we're doing the driver bio for Alex Albon. He is number 23, drives for Williams. He is British and Thai dual citizenship, raised in Britain, but flies for under the Thai flag. And we'll go and kick this off. Round number one, Bahrain. Round number one, Bahrain. Qualified 15th, finished 10th. Fine. That's great. Not fine. That's good, right? He qualified, but he finished in the points, and especially because at the start of the season, keep in mind he started out at a $5.5 million value, which is the lowest I've ever seen it. It started as like around 4.3, which was Nico Hülkenberg started last year at 4.3. I think maybe it was 4, but anyway, so for a driver starting out at 5.5, which is roughly 1/20th of the budget, for him to get points, finish in the points his first race is very, very, very good. So if you have Alex Albon on your team, you're feeling really positive about it. He gets 13 fantasy points, 1 FIA point, all around looking up. Saudi Arabia, qualified 17th, finished 20th with a DNF, 27 laps, and technically he finished 19th with a DNF. But it doesn't matter. As soon as you get a DNF, you get negative 20 points in fantasy. So whenever, for my statistic purposes, as soon as somebody gets a DNF, I just put them all tied for 20th at the bottom. And so he finished up that race with negative 17 points, which, for those of you playing around at home, he started out with 13 fantasy points. He now has negative 17 fantasy points. So if you add those together, he's not doing so hot. He's like, negative 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, negative 4 fantasy points. So going on to round 3 in Australia, qualified 8th, boom, gets another DNF at lap 6. Now, I forget quite how all this shook out, but the fact that he had only 6 laps in before he got a DNF, and it makes me think that it was a turn 1, lap 1, or like a lap 1, he took some damage, and they tried to work it out. Then they just went ahead and retired the car. And this is something very important that I keep harping on, that the race teams and the constructors and the drivers, they don't care about Fantasy Formula 1. They really don't. They care about the driver. They care about the car. And as soon as as soon as it's in their best interest long term to not put more wear and tear on the car, or if they know they're going to be finishing out of the top 10 and there's not going to be a championship points for them, well, then they'll go ahead and just resign, because it's not worth risking more damage to the car when it's not going to get you forward in the championship. Whether you finish 11 or you finish 20, you don't get any championship points, so it doesn't matter. It might matter for like advertisement and things like that, and for morale, absolutely. But if you're driving with battle damage, you're not gonna, there's no point to keep going if you're not in the points. Round number 4, Azerbaijan. He qualified 13, finished 12, and walked away with 2 fantasy points, which is good. And now his overall PP points per million spent is negative 0.88. which stinks, which means that right now at this point, you're still in the negative fantasy points. You're finishing week 4 of a it ended up being 22 weeks, but 23-week season, and you're in the negative points. Like, that is not something. So right about now is when everyone usually would jump ship if you hadn't jumped ship already. But we'll talk about those trends here in a second. Round number 5, Miami, qualified 11th, finished 14th. Again, trending in the wrong direction. Has negative 1 fantasy points. Now his 3-race points per million is down to negative 0.41. Okay. Round number 6 gets skipped. Round 7 in Monaco, qualified 13, finished 14. Again, negative trend. Walked away with 0 points for that. Round number 8 in Spain, qualified 18, finished 16. Good. A little bit in the positive direction. Walked away with 5 fantasy points from that race. Finished a lap down, but it's okay. For Canada, qualified 10, finished 7. Hey, we're back more in the positive direction. Walked away with 22 fantasy points. Now his 3-race average is 0.8, and his 5-race average is 0.5. Now, the reason why I calculate the 3-race and 5-race averages is because the traditional points per million that the website, the FIA, provides takes into account all of the races in the season. And then you get into an issue called regression towards the mean, which means that if I have, and I do lots of different examples like this, but as soon as for the first 3 races I crash out, and so I have negative 20, negative 20, negative 20, and then I start doing well and get 2, 3, and 5 points afterward, those negative numbers are going to weight me down so much that it's going to be very difficult to get out of it. And sometimes the reverse happens, where you like look at Sergio Perez in 23 and look at Austin Martin. They do really, really well, and then they have a drop off. And if you look at, for example, Sergio Perez, he did really great, had a drop off, started climbing back towards the end of the season, but he still finished second in the championship, even though he'd been struggling mid season. I focus on, I have, yes, of course, the total average, but also the 3 and the 5 race averages. So that way you can see what they're doing recently, what they're doing in the middle term, and what they're doing overall, so you can watch those trends. So in the short term, he's looking good at 0.8. In the middle term, he's looking not bad at 0.5, but overall, when you keep those DNFs on his record, he's not doing hot at all. Round number 10, Austria. Qualified 10th, finished 11th. Again, qualified not as well as raced not as well as he qualified. Walked away with 11 points. My guess is there was a lot of passing going on there. Great Britain. Qualified 8th, finished 8th. Wonderful. Now he's qualifying in the points and he's finishing in the points. He walked away with 8 fantasy points from that, which is strong. Then the next race, Hungary, qualified 16th, 7. Again, not in the points, but because he improved his place and passed some people, he walked away with more fantasy points than he did when he qualified 8th and finished 8th. Round 13, Belgium, qualified 16th, finished 14th. Again, not in the points, but all we care about is that he improved his place, and as soon as he is mixing it up with back-of-the-pack drivers, he can pass them easier. Remember, at least in the 2023 rules, 2024 hasn't been released yet, if I'm driving, and let's say I'm 15, if I'm driving, I go in the pits, 4 cars pass me. I don't lose points for that because I'm in the pits. But if I'm faster than them, then I come out of the pits and I pass them again, I get 4 points. I go into the pits again, they pass me, I come out, I pass them again, I get another 4 points. So that's how you can have races like this where Alex Albon is in the back half of the field for the entire race, but yet he gets more fantasy points than when he qualified in the front and finished in the front, because when he's qualifying, when he's in the front half of the field, he's getting passed more. So he's not gaining all those points. But they are. So as soon as I pass you in the pits, so let's reverse my example. I'm driving, you go in the pits, I pass you. I don't get any points because I passed you in the pits. As soon as you come out of the pits and you pass me, I get -1 because you passed me. Then you go in the pits again. I pass you in the pits. Nothing happens because you're in the pits and it doesn't count. You pass me again because you're faster. I go -1. You go +1 again. So when Alex Albon is in the front of the pack, he doesn't get as many points because everybody's faster than him. And he's constantly getting passed. Every time there's a pit stop or anytime there's whatever. When he's in the back of the pack, he's the one doing the passing, so he's getting more fantasy points. Round 14 in the Netherlands. Qualified 4th. Woohoo! Finished 8th. Dang it. Because finishing 8th is still in the points, but he's going to lose points because he qualified, because he finished less than he started, and in that race he finished with 17. Not bad, nothing to shake a stick at, just not great. In Italy, Monza, round 15. Qualified 6th, finished 7th. Good. Solid middle of the pack. 12 fantasy points there. Singapore, qualified 14, finished 11. That's good. Moving up in the pack. Not like moving up the pack, but good. He qualified. He finished better than he started, which is important. 12 points. Round 17, Japan. He qualified 13, got a DNF on lap 26. I'm not sure why, but he had -15 points that round. Alex Albon on Qatar, qualified 14, finished 13. Good, moved up a little bit in the world. Had 23 fantasy points for that race. And I would need to look and see. Okay, so that was a sprint weekend. So some of these I'm not diving too much into the sprint races right now. I have the stats, but the sprint races are kind of an anomaly for me because we'll talk about sprints here in a second, but I really don't know how much the drivers care. We'll talk about that later. Remind me on a different podcast. So he had all those points, and Alex Albon, I believe, does better in sprint races. You know what? I'm curious now. Let's see what's going on here. Sprint races. Okay, so Alex Albon qualified 17 for the sprint, but finished, here we go, 7 for the race. So he got 2 FIA points for that. So I think most of his points come from passing people in the back of the pack. Again, that's just for me analyzing it. I would need to actually watch the races and look out for it a little bit more than I did last season. Round 19, the Grand Prix in Texas. Where'd it go? Here goes. He qualified 18th, finished 9th, which is wonderful. So he gets positive 14 for that. And round 20 in Mexico, qualified 14, finished 8th. So we're beginning to see his trend now. His one lap speed isn't the best, but he can hang with it. He can have good lap after lap after lap pace, and he can get back into the points. So again, finishing 9th, 14 points there. Brazil, qualified 15th, got a DNF with 0 laps completed. So did Charles Leclerc and Kevin Magnussen. So if you want some pretty interesting YouTube watching, go back and try and look up round 21 Brazil Formula One 3-car crash. And it's kind of, I don't remember it too well, but all 3 of those cars had 0 laps and all got DNFs, which means they all crashed on the same lap. And I want to say this is one where they I think it was Magnussen who, I forget. I want to say it was Magnussen, but Alex Albon and Charles Leclerc were muscling around with each other. Magnussen is just trying to drive straight, and they came in and they squished him in a turn, and that was it. I think that was that race, but definitely look it up. It's really fun. Las Vegas, the controversial race that it was. He qualified 6th, finished 12th. Poor Alex Albon, and he got 0 points for that. And then Abu Dhabi, the ultimate race of the season, qualified 14th, finished 14th with 6 fantasy points. So we're going to look at the overall. So he started out as Fantasy World, he started out at $5.5 million. His value increased $5.8 million. So his end value was 11.3, which isn't bad. That's the value Lando Norris started at. And, it's more than Oscar Piastri started. That's more than Pierre Gasly started. That's more than Bottas started. So the value, the value suggests that he improved over the season. That's fine. The part that hurts is the DNFs. So he overtook 123 cars all season. So that was 5.6, around 5.5 passes or overtakes per race, which is huge, and that's where he got most of his points from. He finished in the top 10 7 times, which is great. He had 4 DNFs, and man, I tell you, that really, really stinks, because those DNFs, like I said, you get negative 20 points every DNF, and the fact that he had 4 of them all season means that if there's 23 races, 4 times 4 is 16, 4 times 5 is 20, 4 times 6 is 24, right? So he basically, between a 6th and a 5th of the time, 20% of the time, he didn't even finish the race, which is rough. He got driver of the day once, which is good for him. And overall, he had 127 fantasy points with a 0.51 published points per million. And the lesson from Alex Albon in 2023 is that DNFs will absolutely tank your driver and tank your team. Because if he hadn't had those DNFs, let's just say he just got 0 points instead of those negative points. Each DNF equaled for his overall score negative 20. So let's put those 20 points back on there, right? Well, that means he would have had 80 more fantasy points than he did. As soon as you take 80 plus 127 that he finished with, that's 207 fantasy points for the whole year. Now suddenly, with 207 points, now he's in the same neck of the woods as Lance Stroll, who had 221, with 207. He's now not quite there, but he's a little bit behind Pierre Gasly. And with 207 points, he is far ahead of, he's already far ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, but then he's double what, close to double what Esteban Ocon had, right? And I'm not trying to be too far out here, but then he goes from Yuki Tsunoda. Then he's already better than Yuki Tsunoda points-wise, but then he would have been significantly further ahead of Yuki. So I say all that to say that Alex Albon, if he hadn't crashed out, he would have been the person to have on your team, the value driver, the person who you get in at $5.5 million and you just ride it and you never look back. But because he had those DNFs, it really weighted down his performance, and it turned him to one of those "do I have him, do I not" drivers for all seasons. So going into 2023, going into 2024. It's if he can not crash as much, then he'll absolutely be worth it. If they start him out at the low price again, if they start him out at 6 or 7, he's just absolutely not worth the gamble. If you start him out at $4.5 million again, and hope that he doesn't kiss the wall as much as he did before, then he might be worth it. But yeah. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. I will see you next time. Cheers.